Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, yesterday in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, the American delegation, led by Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, had an 8-9 hour meeting with the Ukrainian delegation, led by Andrei Yermak. Strangely enough, Zelensky took no part in these talks. And at the end of this meeting, the two sides issued a joint statement, and then Rubio and Waltz took part in a news conference. And the gravamen of this meeting was
Was.
that the Americans have put forward a proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, a total ceasefire. So Ukrainians had come into the meeting proposing a 30-day partial ceasefire, just in the air and the sea, but not on land. The Americans said, no, 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 we'll have a complete ceasefire. And the Americans proudly said, Ukraine has agreed to this 30-day ceasefire, and now it is up to the Russians. And so, as things stand, the Steve Witkoff will be traveling to Russia sometime this week, later this week, maybe today.
Tomorrow, Friday, yeah.
And then Trump and Putin are also scheduled to have a conversation by phone sometime later this week. Now, there's a real problem here, and which is whichever way you look at it. Now, Russia is in a tricky position because if they say no to Trump, then that's going to infuriate Trump. Trump does not like anyone saying no to him, and it's not going to be easy to say no to him because they've elevated Trump. They've spoken very, very respectfully about him. The Russians speak very badly, rightfully, about the Europeans, but they're absolutely, very, very respectful, very courteous towards Trump. So saying no to him would somehow undermine, all the respect that they have extended to Trump. And Trump will then conclude, hey, I made a great offer, and we now can see who's the obstacle to peace. That's what he says. Who's the obstacle to peace? And therefore he and the Europeans will throw in their lot with Ukraine. One should say, among the things that were agreed upon at Jeddah was the resumption of military deliveries to Ukraine.
Well, that's a material change.
So that's a material change, plus the sharing of intelligence.
Yeah, that's tangible.
All right. So that's the drawback of saying no. The drawback to saying yes, however, is that NATO is not going to sit still for 30 days. We know that the Europeans, without question, Europeans are not even a party to this. So any agreement or obligations that arise out of this 30-day ceasefire will not extend to the Europeans. So the Europeans can go on pouring in weaponry and pouring in their personnel. I mean, they can just start shoving in their peacekeepers into Ukraine for 30 days. They're helping to build the fortifications, helping Ukraine replenish forces, all of the ways just to strengthen Ukraine as much as possible within the 30 days. So that's an obvious negative for Russia. So it's a difficult situation to be in. So anyway, what are your initial impressions?
I don't really think it's a difficult position to be in because the Russians are going to say no. All right.
All right.
And let's give a little bit of context to this, everyone. The Istanbul process, the unfortunate one that never came to fruition. We saw, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, George, it was not the summer that ended, but the summer before last year when Vladimir Putin was hosting a group of African leaders. He actually showed the Istanbul documents. It's like,
right.
It's like
we've seen that. They were published in the New York Times.
Okay, yeah, but let me finish my point. Okay. This ceasefire thing is like 2 lines. I mean, it's like a total ceasefire on both sides for 30 days, no land, air, and sea. Done. The Russians don't think that way, and they don't act that way. They're going to have a lot of more questions about, well, what is the next step? What is the ultimate conclusion? If this is a first step of a process, what's the next step? What's the last step? These are all questions. These are all valid questions too. George just gave us the background. This is like a 30-day truce for NATO. What does Russia get out of this? It gets nothing out of this at all. Okay.
No, I think that's
And so the only way that the Russians could say they might be interested, I mean, a lot of people think it's just kind of pro forma. The Russians are taking it under consideration. Well, they are actually. They're looking at this and saying, "What are we going to be snookered again? We've been through this dance with these people over and over again," and so I'm waiting for. I'm sure you were waiting for it today because we're closer to that time zone. I'm in the time zone for some kind of official statement. We still, maybe as we're speaking, something is going to come out. But I'm looking for how they're going to say no, because they will say no. This is a non-starter at all. Now, Trump doesn't like to hear the word no. Well, sorry, you're going to get it. All right.
Well, all right.
And I think also, it's been explained to Trump by Putin himself, his position and their phone call of February 12th. Okay, so you think this is going to be a sprint. It's not going to be a sprint. We can only hope for a marathon to get to the end. Okay, so I was completely unimpressed. I don't see where the Russians can go.
Yeah, well, let's look at it this way. I mean,
what are they going to do? Put sanctions on Russia?
Well, first of all,
there's 21,450 sanctions already?
No. That's not the issue. The sanctions can be always tightened. They can always be made harsher by putting pressure on third parties.
Go ahead.
This was Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent said this last week. He's the Treasury Secretary. He's a very smart guy. And he was saying, when he was addressing the New York Economic Club, says the reason why Russia has been able to conduct its military operations is the Biden administration didn't impose the sanctions harshly enough. He may be wrong. But clearly they do have some ideas about how to make it tighter, particularly by applying pressure.
I guess that's what's going to happen
against third parties. We'll see. I mean,
I guess that's what's going to happen.
Okay. I mean, I don't think the Russian economy is going to.
Trump's entire effort.
Okay.
So trying to rebuild relations with Russia will be a dead letter. Trump has a lot to lose.
He doesn't have a lot to lose. He doesn't have a lot to lose. Russia,
okay, then we just go back to square one.
I agree. I think that's probably where it'll happen. But I think why I think there's a chance. I'm not saying they will accept the ceasefire. I think there's a chance that they'll accept the ceasefire. Is that this isn't the final settlement? No one's saying this is a final settlement. This is simply an opportunity to begin negotiations towards a final settlement. Even Israel accepts ceasefires. Yeah, I mean, it ends the ceasefire.
Yeah, well, they never do it in good faith.
But no, but I mean, why does Russia have to do it?
Why does Russia have
to do it in good faith?
They don't. But Israel never wants an outcome.
No, Israel does want, but there are political.
They never negotiate in good faith.
Can I just finish, please? There are political decisions that Israel makes when it agrees to ceasefires. It does agree to them and then ends the ceasefires. So all that is being asked now is a ceasefire for 30 days. During those 30 days, you begin negotiations, and at that point, you can turn around to Trump and say, I don't think you're addressing our issues. And moreover, during these 30 days, you can hold the election. That's an opportunity to say, hey, you've been talking about Zelensky as being illegitimate. Well, we got 30 days. You can hold an election during those 30 days.
But isn't it kind of foolish? I mean, I don't know if you're going to start arguing against yourself now. So NATO will take the initiative, put in peacekeepers, bring in more arms, and the Russians know this all along, and they're going to agree to it.
Right. And then you say you have broken, and then you have an opportunity to say, yeah, you broke the agreement. You broke the 30-day ceasefire. You see, if you have this, if you say we don't agree, goodbye, thank you, we're just going to continue doing what we can, And then Trump then says, okay, well, everything is off the table. All that we've talked about, and all the economic agreements, all the partnership agreements, that's off the table. We and the Europeans are on the same page. We're back to doing everything for Ukraine.
All right, what are your let's
That's
do
it.
some
That's good. Now, if you say,
let's do some odds. What are the odds of that happening, George?
what do you mean? What are the odds? I think
Well, you think it's most
if
likely
Russia says
that
no,
latter
if
scenario
Russia says no,
you
yeah,
just
it'll happen.
presented a scenario a few seconds ago. What is the likelihood of that scenario coming about?
Which scenario?
Okay, Trump says we're working with the Europeans. We're on the same page.
Right.
What are the chances of that happening?
I think they're very good if Russia says no. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. But now we have a real argument. I completely disagree with you. We'll see what happens.
The whole idea that Trump is some kind of a friend of Russia's is just
He's
simply
not.
untrue.
Okay?
He's not a friend of Russia. He
He's
couldn't give a
not.
damn about Russia.
He's
The way he looks upon Russia is that Russia might be able to help us on various things, but it's not a big deal. Because for him, he's got much more important things on his mind. And he's saying, maybe Russia can help us on Iran. Maybe but we can deal with Iran by ourselves. Maybe they can help us with China. Not really. As we have agreed, Russia's not going to do anything about China. It's not going to help America against China. So essentially, there's not really that much that Trump is going to lose by it. It's Russia, I think, that wants to end. I think, understandably, I think Russia doesn't like the isolation.
So you think Russia cares what Donald Trump thinks and feels?
No, it's not a question of Trump. I think Russia.
You think Russia cares
I don't think Russia
what Donald Trump thinks
and
feels?
The issue is whether Russia wants to abandon wholly its relations with the West. And in this case, but with the United States, it doesn't care about the Europeans, but in this case, with the United States, whether Russia is prepared to just abandon that permanently. I don't think Russia is. I don't. And Putin. There's nothing in Putin's career to suggest that he's ever wanted to abandon wholly all relations with the West, which is what would happen. Because Trump is your best bet. Your best bet for some kind of improvement with
Russia has
with
to
the United
compromise,
States, at the very least.
but the U.S. doesn't compromise.
Russia does compromise.
So Russia has to compromise.
No, I didn't say Russia has to compromise. I would say the only compromise we're talking about so far is whether Russia agrees to the 30-day ceasefire, which Israel regularly agrees to. Israel agrees to
bring
ceasefire.
Up that example because
but it's an obvious example. If Israel agrees to ceasefires, why can't Russia agree to ceasefires?
Well, I think that in this case they're agreeing to the ceasefire. I think I'm actually tearing a page from your book. Is that may be a process to end the conflict. Israel never gets into ceasefires to end a conflict.
But no,
Israel goes in, no, let me speak now.
All right.
Israel goes into ceasefires to rearrange the board and then continue on. That has always been the case. There has never been an exception. They're always waiting for the next conflict. In this case, it looks like we're seeing which side with the right formulation is genuinely interested in ending the conflict.
Right.
I would also point out that Russia has made it publicly known exactly what it wants to end this conflict. It is no mystery. You know it as well as I do. Okay.
Right, but that hasn't.
So I ask you the question again. The Russians have to compromise, but the Americans don't.
Russia doesn't have to compromise on anything. All Russia has to do.
So, George, let me go back and use your own words.
You're not really listening.
They go to the ceasefire, and then NATO moves in. That's not a compromise?
All Russia has to do is to say, okay, we will, accept your offer. We will accept your offer, and we want to see whether you are genuine in your offers. If you're not, if you are just going to use these 30 days to strengthen your position, then the ceasefire comes to an end.
We know that's the case already.
But then we know it. Let's then see it.
They know it.
Well, no, but it hasn't happened yet. So we can't just say we know it if it hasn't happened yet.
Well, you know it for sure for NATO, but you don't know it for sure for Russia.
No, that's what you do. You put a ceasefire in place, and then when the other side violates it, then you say you have violated the ceasefire. The ceasefire comes to an end. Moreover, during this time, you can start the negotiations, see whether you are serious about negotiations. And that's why I bring up the example of Israel. What makes Israel so clever in the way it handles its diplomacy is that it suggests to the world that they are serious about peace. That's what they do. And they do it very cleverly. And that's why they have these ceasefires. And well, it's Israel who's interested in ceasefires. It's Israel that's interested in peace. And what happens then, of course, is Israel says, oh, the ceasefires at an end because they have violated it. So exactly the same situation. Russia can say, okay, we're going to take Trump at his word, and we're going to, 30 days. No one's asking you to make any commitments to a long-term ceasefire. It's just 30 days and see what you do. If you violate the terms, then ceasefire is off, and everything continues as before. But at least we took your offer seriously.
Okay. Well, that could happen. Comparing this to Israel as apples and oranges,
No, it's not. No,
I
it isn't.
completely reject that line of argument. However, let's say they take up on him. Who is going to be breaking the ceasefire, George? You know exactly how it's going to play out.
And that's
the Russians are breaking the ceasefire. Oh, they don't.
But they're going to say they're going to say that.
Why should we go through this exercise?
They're going to say that
now, because the Russians are still studying it, at least as far as we know. What about the counteroffer? Is this what they're waiting for? A counteroffer? Okay, we'll consider a 30-day truce on both sides, but your intelligence sharing, your arms delivery, absolutely no NATO boots on the ground. We'll agree to it, but we have our demands. No one's asked us our opinion. You're asking our opinion now. Now, if Trump can say, okay, right, there'll be no more arms delivery. I'm sure there'll be a caveat. Intelligence for defensive purposes, that'll be some wiggle room, but I think the Russians might go for it. And of course, this peacekeeping idea is off the table. Okay, absolutely not. Given those and other, because I just thought of it at the moment here, then you're right. Maybe we can parlay. But I mean, as it stands now, I mean, I don't know, George, have you, I don't think anybody's, news agent said, according to somebody. I haven't seen the document. You haven't seen the document. Maybe
there is a document. I mean, I think other than the statement that was issued yesterday evening.
What I'm saying, if there are caveats and if they allow a counter proposal, hey, we can keep talking if they allow but if this is just a fait accompli in cement, you have no say in this. That's not going to go down well. You have no say in this. Okay.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I think that if the Russians turn around and say, okay, fine, we will consider a 30-day ceasefire as long as you maintain your ban on providing military assistance to Ukraine, and as long as there are to be no, quote, European peacekeepers introduced into Ukraine during those 30 days. I think that's very reasonable. For Russia to say that as a counteroffer to what the Americans are saying. So because as things stand, you're right. As things stand, the 30-day ceasefire and the Americans have now lifted their ban on providing arms for Ukraine. Then you say, hey, well, so you're just going to do 30 days. You're going to use the 30 days in order to keep strengthening Ukraine. That's not a
well,
good.
There's also the issue of what's going on in Kursk. Would that also apply the ceasefire there? I don't think the Russians will go for that. Okay, no, we're going to move these troops out of our country. Okay, that's a sovereign decision on our part. Okay, you're running the Ukraine project. Okay, you take care of your problems. We have a problem here. And you see what I mean, George? It's got to be a little bit more nuance here.
Right. No, I think that's fair. I think it's fair to say that the ceasefire will apply only in the territory of Ukraine. It will not apply on the territory of Russia because this is on Russian territory, and therefore that's a different issue altogether. And so therefore, yeah, we will continue liberating Ukraine. I mean, liberating Kursk.
To sweeten the pot, and maybe my Russian friends will be absolutely furious with me for what I'm about to say. When it comes to that, if during that ceasefire, if Ukrainian troops will be allowed unhindered to leave Kursk, right. Just walk out, leave.
Right. No,
they will not be fired upon. They will not be killed. They can walk out, leave. I think again that would be a sign of good faith.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But that's why I keep going back. We need, I think you were misunderstanding what I was saying earlier. I mean, when we looked at Istanbul, I mean, it was
Right.
extremely
No,
thorough.
but that was a final settlement. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the Russians are very, very meticulous
No.
about these
Right.
things.
Right. No,
And I know it's great to go in front of the cameras and be the cavalier. We have a ceasefire, 30-day
right.
ceasefire. Oh, I'll have to go to another meeting. Okay. It doesn't mean anything to me when you say something like that. Okay. Because these things are too important to be so cavalier about.
Right. No, that's right. No, but what I'm saying is that Istanbul was the terms of the final settlement, so they were obviously very detailed.
Fair, fair, fair,
So
fair.
whatever comes out, if we get anywhere with any kind of negotiations, that'll obviously be very detailed. So initially, this is I think you're on the right lines. I mean, in that here, well, the Americans, and this is a Trump offer. This is not a Ukrainian offer. If it was a Ukrainian offer, then Russia could say no, we're not interested. But this is a Trump offer, and so therefore they have to treat it respectfully. And I think that if they say to Trump and say, okay, well, we're absolutely open to a 30-day ceasefire. However, we will have to attach conditions, and I think those conditions are very reasonable, which is you don't continue to deliver arms to Ukraine. Um, Ideally, you would also have to say to the Europeans also, though they're not a party to the agreement, but the Europeans also have to stop deliveries of arms during these 30 days and the intelligence sharing. And then I guess you'd have to deal with the Kursk issue as well, because Russia can't really agree to a ceasefire and let Ukraine occupy territory inside of Russia. So that I think that would be a reasonable
Look,
position for Russia to take.
I think it's important to both the United States and Russia. I do. I don't think Trump or Putin is treating this in a cavalier way. I think this is more important than you said earlier. I think this is a reachable, attainable win, and I think Trump savors it. Okay, I think he really wants it because you know why? It's doable under the right circumstances. And if it's explained to him in the right way, I think that given the again, everybody, when George and I do this, it's like a cold call. Okay.
Right,
I haven't sat down for hours and wrote down notes and you have
right,
a formal debate with George because I
right,
don't have to because he's my friend. But if this is explained to him, the Russians are saying this. It's more nuanced than what Rubio and the
right.
Ukrainians talked about in Jeddah. But this is doable, and you know what it would be, George, with the caveats that you and I have attached. That would be a meaningful first step towards a final
Right, right,
outcome. That would be a first meaningful one, measurable
right,
one.
right. No, I think that's right. I think you have to um, gauge your opponents to say whether are you using a ceasefire as an opportunity simply to strengthen your forces, which it's the very basis for when either side agrees to a ceasefire. Are you taking a ceasefire seriously, meaning that no one takes any unilateral advantages of the pause in the fighting? If, however, you are sending arms, delivering arms to Ukraine, then you're obviously taking advantage of a pause in the fighting. And I mean, that's, we can't agree to that. So I think that's absolutely reasonable. And it would be a very good counteroffer because then Trump can't turn around. Hey, well, I made this really generous offer, and they show me the back of their hand. I think that's a a very I think it's a reasonable position to take.
Yeah,
And but then of course even then after even if they agree to some kind of a ceasefire, the terms of a final settlement are still going to be extremely difficult. They're very, very difficult. But again, but what I was saying earlier is that I mean that's important caveat about the cessation of arms deliveries. But otherwise, a ceasefire. I mean, if neither side is taking advantage of it, then there's nothing inherently bad about it. I mean, it's basically you use it as an opportunity to start the process of a final negotiation towards a final settlement. And there's also the question of the election. Ukraine, you said you can't hold an election because of the war. Hey, this is your opportunity to hold an election. So that's absolutely something, I mean, maybe the Americans are going to suggest that to Putin when Witkoff
Yeah.
visits him in Moscow. Hey, well, this could be a
I
way of
think
getting rid of Zelensky.
I think it's safe to say we're not going to hear a Russian response until Witkoff arrives, and
You know,
the Russians have had time to study it. I'm sure they've come up with everything that you and I have come up, and probably more, because I know some of these people. These people,
right,
they are so meticulous. I mean, it's maddening how
right,
meticulous they can be. But
right.
we have to keep in mind, everyone, it's Russia that's not asking for a ceasefire. It's the U.S. on behalf of Ukraine, even though Ukraine has come kicking and screaming. And we have to always keep that in mind, okay? This is something, and again, I'm going to plagiarize George because he observed it many years ago, and I've used it ever since. Is that the Americans always are concerned with the interest them.
All
They're
right,
not
yeah.
particularly interested in what the other side's problems
No,
are.
no, I
Okay,
think that's right.
and as it's been presented to us, that is being played out again.
No, I think so. And I think goes back to the point I was making about Trump. All the things that Trump is talking about, with Russia, they're all things that help America. There's nothing that Trump has
Yeah,
raised
that's good.
as
That's
in any
fair.
way helps Russia. Oh, I want some help on Iran. Well, that you have a problem with Iran, you think Russia's going to help you out. Oh, I want some help on China. Again, this is something that you want, but there's nothing in it for Russia. Oh, I want some help with exploiting the mineral resources of the Arctic. So can you help us with these icebreakers? These are all things that America would like. But the moment Russia ever, raises issues, yeah, well, how about talking about some of the things that matter to us? Well, yeah, well, let's do lunch
Yeah.
sometime.
Well, we have a litmus test right now
Right.
to see it's good that you bring that up. Well, it's good that I brought it up and you reacted to what you said before.
Right.
Um, if there, Marco Rubio with his interview with Megyn Kelly, the multipolar world, remember that one? And
Yeah.
everybody kind of sat up and paid attention, including us. Um, this is all a litmus test of what right now is that you have a problem, we have our own problems, and we're going to have to sit down and see if we can square the circle and solve some of our problems while you solve some of your problems.
Right.
But we're not here to solve the other guy's problems. And I think this is a test of that. Um, um, Trump does obviously within the paradigm of America First, which is perfectly fine with me. But to achieve some of these ends, you're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to give a little bit. It might indirectly help the other guy out, though it's maybe never your intention. Is there a paradigm shift here? Is there a new way of doing business? Because I've observed Russian diplomats up close, up close, and I am supremely unimpressed with the American cadre. I mean, Chaz Friedman. Well, he was a brilliant diplomat. He's a really, really smart guy. He learned Mandarin Chinese. He speaks Arabic. He knows how these countries and societies work. You given the portfolio to Marco Rubio. Well,
Right. Well,
yeah,
I mean, the way the Americans see it is that ultimately they will take you seriously if, in some ways, you're able to deliver pain to them. If in some ways you can make them hurt, then they will take you seriously, and then they will start taking your concerns seriously. And this goes back to something that I talk about. Lavrov wrote an essay. I think a few months ago, it's published on the foreign ministry site. And he was talking about the wartime diplomacy, and he said something correct there, that the America and Britain did not take the Soviet Union seriously, any of their demands seriously, until after Stalingrad, because only then did it occur to them that the Soviet Union was going to win this war, and the Soviet Union was going to play a major role in winning this war. And then they started taking the Soviet issue seriously. Up until then, they absolutely couldn't care less. They just ignored them. Goodbye. But after 1943, they suddenly started these wartime conferences, started to get serious. And that's the way the Americans think. You say, well, show us something that's impressive. Show us something that will actually affect our bottom line. Up until then, they just don't really care, and they basically take that attitude here in Ukraine. They'd like to bring it to an end, but if it doesn't come out, it doesn't come out. We've got other fish to fry. This is Rubio and Waltz, they're just going ahead with what Trump has instructed them to do this. And you can even, the way they speak, it's clear they're always just simply repeating, the president wants this, the president wants that.
Yes,
This is President Trump's view. They never say what they believe. It's always, we're just carrying out President Trump's wishes.
Well, particularly a case in point, Marco Rubio, he never wastes a chance to run his mouth on just about anything under the sun. But you see how he speaks, particularly on this issue. He
Right.
is strictly modulated.
Right.
George is absolutely right. In the Oval Office, he wasn't arguing with Zelensky. J.D. Vance was, okay? Marco Rubio was stuck in the middle of the couch,
Right.
probably seeping into the cracks there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay?
Well,
Absolutely.
that's right. He was thinking, and that.
Keith Kellogg, we have to say bye, Keith.
Yes, that was a
Good
very
knowing you.
Keith Kellogg seems to be, but it's not a really, yeah. He's apparently he will take no further part in the negotiations, but he never really took much of a part in the negotiations. It's like, well, you don't have a job anymore, but then you never really did have a job, so it was a very strange thing. I mean, Trump appointed him, but then as soon as he appointed him, he hired someone else to carry out the negotiations he was supposed to carry out.
Well, I think I haven't had a chance to do this, and because I refuse to watch Fox News anymore, maybe he made an appearance on Hannity and Trump, said, I like that guy.
Right.
Maybe that's how the origin story of Keith Kellogg. Okay. So,
That's a possibility. He has hired people on the basis of he watched them on Fox News. I think in the case of John Bolton, because I think he always had a fixation on John Bolton, that he just watched him on Fox News. He saw him on Fox News. He liked what he said, and somehow he thought, oh, yeah, John Bolton. Yeah, I want to hire him. Yeah, he's going to be good. No, but that was, it should have been obvious to anyone that he and Bolton are not going to hit it off. So yeah, it may well be that somebody thought, hey, Keith Kellogg, he's a really sensible guy. But
George, I just want your kind of take on this. The way you saw the ceasefire idea presented, was there any wiggle room in your mind, other than it's a take it or leave it approach, or we'll see what the Russians have to say? I mean, it's a cliche. The ball was in their court, but it's so cliche-ish that it doesn't really mean anything anymore.
Right.
So what is your gut? They're saying, this is what we're proposing. What do you think? Or, my way or the highway. How do you?
Well,
How do you
I
view
think that's a good point. I mean, I felt that this was a way of wrong-footing Russia, that they will present this, and essentially they're going to present Russia with two bad alternatives. Either you accept this deal, in which case you're going to have to put up with our strengthening Ukraine for the next 30 days, helping to build their fortifications, strengthening all their defensive positions, or you say no, and therefore you risk enraging Trump, and then Trump could just simply, get angry and really escalate America's involvement. So I thought it's a way of how do we wrong foot Russia, but in a way it was because Biden and the Europeans have been pursuing this mindless policy for 3 years. I'm surprised that they hadn't done this earlier. It was Trump who sort of said, hey, well, we can actually put Russia in a bind, because the whole idea before that was just, well, There's no negotiations. We're just going to give Ukraine whatever Ukraine wants. As long as you want to, Ukraine's ready to go and fight him. We're going to send everything we got to Ukraine. And then Zelensky, he has this legislation. Well, we can't negotiate with Russia, and that's it. That was 3 years. There have been no negotiations. So now this is okay. I thought, yeah, the whole purpose of this is to wrong foot Russia.
Okay, well, you might not get the outcome that you want, okay? Or maybe they did. Maybe so many people, we for centuries of moving forward, people are going to wonder what was it like to being in Donald Trump's head, okay?
Right.
Because so many different conflicting ideas can exist at the same time.
Right, right.
But maybe,
But I said wrong foot. I think I meant people like Rubio and Walz. I think
that's
Trump,
what I was about to say.
yeah,
Exactly. That was exactly what I was about to say, is that people like Rubio are thinking, yeah, well, this is a way to trip him up.
yes,
Okay, yeah. That's my
right,
my thinking too.
right.
Well,
Yeah, no, I think in the case of Trump, I think he does. I think he does genuinely want to bring this thing to an end. I mean, I think he does want to do it, and I think he probably thought, hey, this is a good offer. This is a good deal. We got a 30-day ceasefire, and then we'll use this as a springboard for serious negotiations or final outcomes. Like, hey, what's wrong with that? That I think that he would regard that. It's interesting though that same logic. That has a certain logic. The same logic, he doesn't apply in the case of Israel and Gaza. He doesn't,
well,
there he doesn't at all think about, hey, we can use a ceasefire and as the springboard for a long-term negotiated outcome, because we can see that Israel is not moving on to phase two. I mean, that's the whole point of a ceasefire is phase one, and then you move to phase two. So he sees the relationship between a phase one and a phase two in this case, but for some reason he doesn't see it in the phase one and phase two in the case of Israel.
it just captured elite in the United States are just so blind. It's such a horrific blind spot. Okay. It never applies to the Israelis. It applies to everybody else. Okay. And particularly, what leverage does the United States have vis-a-vis Russia when it comes to Ukraine? Not much.
No,
I mean, yeah, not much. I mean, make some, what they can do is they can make Russia's trading partners angry and frustrated.
Right.
They
Well,
can,
that's
they
what
can punish the weaker, okay?
right.
But they can't really do much when it comes to Russia. But when it comes to Israel, the United States has all of the leverage and it doesn't do anything at all.
Right.
It's so bizarre, okay?
Right. No, that's right. I mean, Russia's situation is that it can, in principle, it can do without the West. I mean, there's no question it can do without the West. It did that during the Soviet era, etc. But I don't think Russia wants to go there. That's the thing. I think Russia that's a last option, and Russia doesn't really want to go there.
Great powers, and Russia is a great power, wants always to have options.
Right.
That's what makes you a great power, is that you have Albania has few options, okay?
Right.
Macedonia has few options, okay? Great powers have a myriad of options. That's what makes being a great power, okay? And Russia would like to have them. I think that still. And it goes back a century, more than a century. Russian energy and German technology. Oh, what a beautiful story that would be.
Yeah,
It's not. It's anemic. It's on life support, but it's not dead.
It's not dead, but there've been news stories that appeared in recent days is that the Germans, particularly the new German government in waiting by Friedrich Merz, is absolutely determined not to allow Nord Stream to reopen. Absolutely determined. So, and because apparently the Germans are afraid that Trump and Putin are going to come to an agreement and Nord Stream 2 will be part of that agreement. They will open I don't believe it for 1 minute. I don't believe the story for 1 minute.
No. I mean, blowing up Nord Stream was for American energy companies. Okay?
Yes, exactly.
I know we had a guest recently, and the circumstances in which something like that would happen is that you would have an assertive new, fresh German government. We need fresh eyes on all of this, and really put a halt to this war mania in Europe. And the Germans are only adding to it. So that kind of thinking, I think it's just kind of imbecilic, personally.
It is imbecilic, but the reason I doubt the truth of the story, but I mean, I agree that there may be some panic-stricken, hysterical
Oh,
Germans.
they're panic driven anyway.
Exactly, they're thinking, "Oh my God, Trump is going to want to open up Nord Stream 2." And they forget that Trump hated the Nord Stream
That's
idea.
right.
He was determined to stop it. But they become obsessed that somehow America and Russia are going to gang up
Oh,
on Europe.
wait for the story in the tabloids, Trump is going to allow the American Air Force to let Russian paratroopers flood Europe.
Right. Yeah,
This is just
right. Yeah,
maddening
that's
stuff.
right.
But the war fever,
Yes,
it's terrifying.
right,
It's terrifying.
right. No, no question. There's when you read The Guardian, there at any moment they're expecting a U.S.-Russian alliance against Europe. Hey, wait, we need to attack Europe. You do it from the west, we do it from the east, and we're basically going to divide up Europe between us. So yeah,
Yeah,
this is
Poland, 1939.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. This is the level of this lunacy in Europe. Um, but I mean, going back to our question, I think it's going to require some deft diplomacy by the Russians. I mean, I think they're going to have to treat Trump very respectfully. They're going to have to come back to him with, and I think you put it very well, a counter proposal. So yeah, we're in principle, we're in agreement, but we do need to dot the i's and cross the t's. And they have to do that. I mean, because they've been treating Trump very respectfully, differentiating United States from Europe. I mean, Europe, they just totally
Oh,
despise
Macron,
them.
his Napoleonic
Yeah,
complex.
that's right.
Yeah, George is absolutely right. They've treated the Trump administration with kid gloves. I mean, considering the absolutely obnoxious language that comes out of the American political class about
Right,
Russia, it's not reciprocated. It's
right.
not at all.
No,
Okay,
that's right. Yeah,
and even Biden was spared that. Okay,
yeah, right,
it's again the Russians and the Americans, the Americans used to have something called diplomacy. They're just
right,
so out of practice from it now.
right.
And now we have patience here. Everyone, take this thing. Those of you that watched all of this here, see, this is how people debate and how people come to an understanding.
Right,
Did you see this kind of, woo,
right,
George and I, like that? But we ended up in the same
right.
place.
Exactly.
Why?
Yeah,
Because you talk it out, you think it out, you
right,
challenge,
right,
concede,
right,
agree.
right. Exactly.
Okay.
And I think
Because this is what really frustrates me about a lot of these podcasts, which I have a lot of admiration for. But it's not adversarial. There's no,
right,
let's shake it up. Let's talk about this.
right.
There's
No,
none
that's
of
right.
that.
And I think we then I think we arrive. I think to a consensus, which I think is going to be close to the truth. I think what we've the conclusion I think we have arrived at. I think it's very close to what's going to happen later this week. I think
We
that's what.
both
Yeah,
hope.
yeah,
We
yeah.
both hope because that's where we want this to. We want this to end. We want it to be over. We predicted it was going to happen. It was a train wreck in plain sight for all of us to watch.
Right,
Okay.
right,
So
yeah,
I have to go in about 4 minutes. But I mean, I guess another thing George and I are going to be looking at is the hysterics in Europe over all of this.
right,
Because once the Russians, and I think George and I are right, there's going to be a counter offer within the offer.
right, yeah,
Right? I mean, I think that's because at this stage you want no one wants to lose face, okay?
right,
Unless George is right, is that people like Marco Rubio just want to wrong foot you
right,
from the get-go. I'm not going to go there yet. I think it's a possibility, okay? But if this is going to be the parlay begins, the music starts getting a little bit louder here.
right.
I'm very curious to watch how not to blow a fuse, it's going to be a circuit breaker.
Right, but it's interesting because so far the European response has been, "Oh, we really welcome this
Yeah,
proposal."
yeah.
But the reason why they're saying that is they think this is we're gonna wrong foot the Russians. The Russians really are now going to be in a bind. The Russians will say no. Of course, they'll say no. And then once they say no, Trump is going to come join us and say, well, that's it. You were right, boys. And I was wrong. The Russians are as swinish as you said they are. We need to do everything we can for Ukraine.
Of
That's
course,
the
Donald
plan.
Trump
That's what
will
Ursula
never.
von der Leyen, she sent out a tweet. Kaya Kallas sent out, we welcome this proposal. Oh, we welcome it. Now the ball is in Russia's court. They all say this. Oh, we welcome it. The ball is in Russia's court. They think that's it. We've wrong-footed the Russians.
I've realized that her English is worse than Burrell's.
Which one?
That's even possible.
Ursula?
I saw an interview with her this morning.
Oh, Kaya Kallas?
Yeah, Kaya Kallas. Her English is.
Yeah, I thought
It's kind of like fourth grade.
Right. Yeah, I thought her English was better actually. Yeah, I thought it would be. I was surprised.
Well, another thing we can't forget is that who is a huge supporter of this ceasefire agreement? Boris Johnson, everybody.
Exactly.
I mean, it's breathtaking, the hypocrisy of that guy.
Right.
It's breathtaking.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
and he says it with a straight face.
Right. Yeah. No, well, Boris Johnson, of course, has his political ambitions. He still has plans to return and to be a wartime prime minister. Somehow he'll be a Churchillian figure. I don't think it's going to happen. But he still has fantasies. It's an amazing feature of British politics that these prime ministers who are ousted then harbor fantasies for some years afterwards that the nation will call them back. Margaret Thatcher did that as well. For several years, she still harbored fantasies that she will return to power once people see how terrible her successor is. It doesn't happen. It just, Churchill was a one-off.
One-off.
It's not going to happen with anyone else.
And when he came back to power, he really shouldn't have done it.
No. He was
and because he was in very poor health.
He was in very poor health. He was very, very poor. Yeah. He was hospitalized a number of times.
Very few people that get after your initial stay in power, you should can even consider an encore. I mean, that was really brave.
That was he was hospitalized for many times, and a lot of times he just didn't know what was going on. He'd be in a cabinet meeting and had no idea what anything. So yeah, it was a one-off. He had a huge reputation, but yeah.
Last point before I go, everyone. Justice is caught up with Mikhail Saakashvili. Okay, he's going to be imprisoned for embezzlement. 9 years or
9 years. Yeah.
So, Zelensky could be your future.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Once you're a vassal, doesn't mean they're going to take care of you forever. As a matter of fact, you're spare baggage at one point. Okay. Ask Saakashvili.
Right. Okay. No, I think so. I think that in Russia's counteroffer, I think they are going to propose elections in Ukraine. So a legitimate government can emerge that can negotiate legitimately with us.
All right.
All right then.
Everybody, bookmark this, save this one, send it to your friends. Okay. George and I, we've set up the board. We're going to see which pieces are going to be moved now.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This is Wednesday. It means tomorrow. George has his live stream.
Live stream Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, ideas, suggestions on the way out the door. Think about these dogs. They're getting really angry. I mean, you say, hey, look, we're trying to sort out the world here, and we're not getting any money. The burden of the world is on our shoulders. So in order to relieve some of that tension, anything you've got, straight into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we have to lift the burden off these poor dogs. So remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.